Most entrepreneurs today are still focused on ROAS to make marketing decisions. And in this video, I actually want to show you why, if you're still doing that, you're losing money by not spending you're either spending too much or too little to acquire customers. So I'm going to walk you through exactly why ROAS is the wrong metric to be using and exactly what you should be using instead. So before we get into that, my name is Jeremy Reeves. I am the owner of Scale Advisors and the author of the #1 best-selling book, The Scalable Profit Model. And over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what I just talked about, right? So let's just start with why I don't like ROAS. And if you're not familiar with the term, that's just return on ad spend, right? So a lot of people, they'll spend $100 and they make, let's just say $100 average order value, $100 on that first transaction. And they say, I'm breaking even on customer acquisition. And I mean, I guess that's true if you're only talking about gross, right? In that sense, yes, it's true. But there's a lot of things that go into it, right? So number one, ROAS does not it doesn't measure actual profit or how I like to measure things in contribution margin, right? So if we go back to that same $100 acquisition, right? You spent $100 and you generate $100 in revenue. Okay, great. But if your contribution margin, if what you actually keep with each individual sale is only 50%, that means you're only keeping $50 out of that $100 that you spent to acquire the customer. So your ROAS is actually not 100%. It's actually 50% because you're only keeping 50% of what you spent, right? Pretty simple, but it's something that a lot of people miss. And a lot of people actually don't even know what their contribution margin is. So they don't even know what decision to make. So if you're in a spot where, number one, you're tracking ROAS, and it's not that it's a bad metric, it's just an incomplete metric, right? It's you need ROAS, but you also need all these other things. And the way that I like to calculate this personally is what I call CM-ROAS, so contribution margin adjusted ROAS, which is just simply, instead of looking at that $100 sale that you generated, you're saying, okay, well, that was revenue, but what do I actually keep? Again, 50%. So it's 50% CM-ROAS. So in my opinion, ROAS, it's not that it's a bad metric in itself. Again, it's just incomplete. It's a signal, right? That you can easily look at a dashboard and but when you're actually making decisions, the first step you have to do is switch to CM-ROAS. All right. So hopefully that covers why I don't like it. And it's just simply because it misses things. It's incomplete. Like most metrics are, it's incomplete. All right. So with that said, I want to dive into what I call acquisition economics. This is the second lever that I use in my 5 lever system for building a scalable profit model. And so I want to dive into acquisition economics, right? So the way that I look at acquisition economics is it's really two parts, right? It's an efficiency metric, like most things are, revenue and profit. Like profit is an efficiency metric of revenue, which basically means that if you have a 10% profit margin, that means you're being 10% efficient at converting revenue into profit. Pretty simple. And acquisition economics is kind of the same thing, but I like to split it in two different areas. Number one is conversion efficiency. All right. So how efficiently are you converting prospects into customers, right? And the metric here, of course, is, I'm going to give you a sec, conversion rate. All right. I'm sure you probably got that one. That was a pretty simple quiz, right? So first one is conversion rate. So how efficiently are you converting prospects that you're generating from all your paid ads or even just referrals, whatever it is, into paying customers? All right. So very simple conversions. The second one is economic efficiency. All right. And that's just simply how efficiently or how much are you maximizing how much you generate per transaction per customer. All right. And the metric to go by with this one would be, of course, average order value. All right. Because that measures how much you generate per transaction, right? Average order value, right? And again, just like ROAS, I like to use contribution margin in this. So it's not AOV, it's CM-AOV. Or you could just simply say, how much contribution margin am I creating per transaction? That's what I personally do. It depends on where you're at and what metrics you're tracking, things like that. Whether it's easier just looking at CM-AOV or just simply contribution margin dollars. All right. But when you look at both of those in as a holistic unit, that's what I would call acquisition economics. All right. So let's dig into each one because neither, if you just separate them out, neither alone is enough, right? You need both of them as a combined unit, right? Just like the five levers are five levers that create a holistic unit of how your business runs and operates and how scalable it is, and how profitably you can scale it. Conversion and economic efficiency are basically two sides of the same coin when it comes to acquisition economics. All right, so let's dig into each. So we'll start with conversion efficiency. All right, so this, as you're going about and creating your marketing, this is going to start at the ad level. All right, and you've probably read books like Persuasion, things like that by Robert Cialdini. When it comes to marketing starts from the moment they hear about you. It's not just on your landing page, your advertorial, or your sales page, or your VSL, or whatever Shopify store page, whatever main page you're sending them to. That's not where it starts. It starts in the ad itself, because in the ad itself, the job of that is what? It's to capture attention and create interest. All right. So when people are looking for your product or your service, on Facebook, or you're trying to get them cold or whatever it is, your job is to get them to stop scrolling wherever they are, capture their attention, and then once you capture their attention, you create interest in your product. All right, you're not trying to well, depending on the ad, some ads, it depends on how. I won't go into that, right? It depends a lot on how you're doing all this. It's actually a whole other video itself, and like how you actually structure your ads in terms of like top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, that sort of thing, market level awareness. That's actually something we can discuss in a bigger video, right? Or in a separate video. Like how much are they product aware? Do they already know about your product? Do they know about your solution? Are they problem aware, where they just know they have a problem, but they don't know about your product or your solution, right? Like what you have to first figure out where they are on those that level of awareness. And just to recap those super quickly, if you start at the bottom, there's unaware. They have no idea you exist. They don't know there is a problem. Nothing. That's a completely cold audience. Generally, the hardest to make work, right? And then above that, we have problem aware, right? And that is basically where they have a problem. They know they have a problem, but they don't know about your solution, right? They're just kind of frustrated, right? So that's level like 4, right? At the bottom, it's the second hardest to do. The next one is solution aware. So they know they know they have a problem, and they know there are solutions out there for that problem. All right, and that's typically. It depends on how big you are, right? As you go down or up, I guess, depending on how you look at it, right? But this is like if you think of a pyramid, we're going kind of bottom to top. This is where we're kind of in the middle, right? Where they know they're frustrated, they know there's solutions out there. Maybe they're starting to look at them, that sort of thing, but they're not. They haven't dialed in on one specific person yet, but they're in that phase of looking for solutions to a problem that they have. All right, and your ad should should tailor to that, right? And then above that, then they have product aware. So at this point, they are aware of your product, right? They're aware that other products exist. And at this point, this is really where differentiation is really going to come into play, because a lot of these people are in buying mode. All right, they're looking for solutions. They're actively in buying mode. They're comparing you to your competitors. So that's why it's really good to have things like overcoming objections and parts of your copy in the video that are talking about why you're unique and having a unique mechanism, or why you're special, why this is going to get better results, those sorts of things, right? And then, of course, we have the top, and that's most aware. That is simply with their customers, right? So we're going to do retargeting, we're going to be doing the back end conversion systems, all the things like that, right? So that's just a super quick summary of the awareness levels. And when you're creating ads, you need to make sure that that you know what awareness level you're talking to, and then that awareness level matches in congruency with the page that you're sending them to. That's the super, super, super important part that a lot of people miss, and it's really important not to miss that. All right. And then we get them to the landing page. All right, so that was the ads. Once they're on the landing page, again, first of all, the number one job of that landing page is to be congruent with the ad. So you don't want to be talking about pain point A, and then they go to a lab that doesn't even mention that pain point. All right, as much as you can, I am a huge fan of segmentation, where it's a very a very specific problem in the ad, which goes to a page that specifically talks about that same problem that they just clicked on in the ad. All right, and of course now it's much easier to do that with AI. It's a lot more work, but you will get better conversions because, again, if you're calling them out, they have a certain problem, and then you talk about the solution. Well, if you just send them to a generic page about your solution, it might convert good, it might not, right? But if you're talking about a very specific problem and a solution, and then they go to a page and it's like, hey, if you have this problem, here's exactly how our product is going to solve that problem for you. All right. And so you can see it's going to be very, very much more targeted and more, it's going to resonate, right? It's going to be more congruent. It's going to be a lot more specific to the thing that they just clicked on to try to find a solution. All right. So whenever you can, this depends a lot on the volume. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but one of the simplest things that you can do if you want to increase your conversions is just have more specific landing pages. All right. Simple enough. Now, on the landing page itself, right, on the main sales page, and I'm not talking about like an advertorial. If you're doing, sometimes you do an advertorial before the main sales page. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about here is the main sales page that actually sells them on your products, and they click the button and then they go to the order form. All right, that page. What I would recommend is following my scalable offer score. All right, and I'm not going to go into detail on that in this video. What I am going to do, I'm going to have a separate video for that. So if you're watching this, just look that up on my channel or the podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. Just look up the scalable offer score. There'll be more detail about that. That'll be a separate video because it'd make this one too long, right? But in general, there's three things that each have kind of subcategories in it. So there's market fit, conversion strength, and scale potential. All right, those are like the three big buckets of how you create a scalable offer. And I built this, by the way, before I get into it, I built a scalable offer after doing about $200 million online throughout multiple verticals, mostly in the D2C space. And I was looking for like, what are the congruencies? What are the the commonalities between the offers that worked and the offers that didn't work, right? And so I came up with this. And again, the three big buckets are market fit, conversion strength, and scale potential. All right. And so within market fit, you have pain severity. So like how severe is the pain that they're that they're suffering from. The second one is market timing, and that's a really, really, really important one that a lot of people skip over. All right. And market timing is just simply like in every market has market maturation cycles, right? And so you'll see, like, especially if you look at weight loss, you see a lot of the same things cycle back around. There's trends, right? Those trends tend to cycle, right? There's cycles in just about everything. You could same thing with clothing, right? Where there's a lot of times you'll look back and be like, someone will start a new trend, and it's like, oh, you're just bringing back a trend from the 80s or from the 90s or from the early 2000s or whatever it is, right? So you want to be looking at that because market timing is what gives you either a headwind or a tailwind in whatever you sell. All right. And most of my biggest winners, I've done at least 5 that I know of, offers that have done 8 figures or more in their, in their lifetime, several of them per year. And all of them were at the tail end of a market. They were at, like, if you think of a wave, right? Market timing is a wave. They were at, or sorry, the not tail end. They were at the front of the wave. All right, and they were kind of leading the charge. The wave had started, right? So they weren't creating marketing demand. The wave had already started, but it had not crested. It was building in strength. And when you find that wave in a market and you build along with that wave as it's growing, that's when you get a really good tailwind behind you. And everything that you do is going to is going to do better, right? So that's market timing, and then the third one is just competitive landscape, and that's just simply you want to find a sweet spot where you have competitors, but you don't have too many competitors, and you're going to get drowned out. Like you want to find something that has competitors because that proves demand in the marketplace, but you don't want to have it too much where you have to be in business for 10 years just to be able to participate in that market. You want to be able to find something that has the demand and then also has some sort of unique opportunity for you to uh, come in and deliver something unique into that existing marketplace. All right. Then we move on to conversion strength. So it's everything that's going to help the offers convert better. So here we have perceived value. I think most people watching this know what perceived value is, so I won't spend much time on it, right? But it's just simply when they are reading your sales page, what is the perceived value that they have after reading that page, all right? Second one is outcome speed. So it's just simply how fast are you getting them outcomes compared to your competitors? The sixth one is ease of results. So how easy is it for them to get results with your product? All right. Seventh one is certainty of results. So how certain are they, not you, but they, how certain are they? What's the believability factor that they have by the time they click your call to action button? So again, certainty of results. People will pay more and they will convert higher if they're more certain. And this is really where proof comes in, right? We all know that proof helps convert better, and there's multiple forms of proof. And again, that's a separate video. But the more proof you have in more unique ways, right? So basically, the better generally your offer is going to convert, right? Very simple. And then finally, we have offer uniqueness. So this is what I call a unique mechanism. What is it that's unique about your offer? And not unique just to be unique, right? But why is it unique in the way that it gets results for people, right? So the mechanism that you have should always be geared around it's unique, and that's why it gets you better results. All right. So if you can fill in that blank, that's going to help. And then finally, we have scale potential, and that's actually pretty simple. There's only two of them. Number one is the economic scalability, right? So how do your numbers look, right? What is your capital return velocity? How fast are you putting out money to pay for acquisition and then getting that money back, right? How much do you have to float, right? So it's looking at all these factors, including your AOV, your LTV, all these things, and it's just simply you're kind of scoring yourself on how well you're doing on the economic side of things, because again, with acquisition there's the conversion side and then also the economic side of things, right? All the metrics, all the numbers that you have to have, because you can only afford to pay so much per customer before it doesn't make sense for you anymore. So you have to find what that is, your allowable customer acquisition cost, or ACAC, and then like how well are you doing to model that, right? And then the final one is ascension potential. So this one is something that a lot of people miss. So this is if you look at when someone buys your product, and let's say it's the first time they bought that product, how well are you able to turn that into higher and higher lifetime value? All right, because some products lend really well to that. Things that are consumables and you can get them to be a habit in their day to day life, like a coffee brand, for example. That's going to have really good ascension potential, because if they switch to your brand of coffee, that's something people can drink for years and decades and decades and decades, right? People typically don't switch their coffee all that much. So that's a good example of something that you can get a nice high lifetime value. Another example would be something that you can that leads itself well into a service. All right, so off the top of my head, let's say you're selling some sort of blood pressure supplement, and that is maybe it I don't know. There's some sort of unique way that they take that, but then it leads to something else. Whether that's coaching, whether it's a custom meal plan, whether it's custom labs. There's a lot of these things that you can ascend from that initial purchase up into other services, into bundle packages, into quantity packages. Like instead of just taking it 1 month, we're going to sell you like a 1 year package, and maybe that includes coaching, maybe it includes labs, whatever your offer is, right? How well does that turn from a one-time purchase into lifetime value, right? And that's what we're doing there. Now, that is the conversion side of things, right? Getting people to actually buy your product. And there's a little bit of economics baked in there. Now we're going to move to the economic side of things. All right. So as I mentioned before, CM-ROAS over ROAS, right? So just start there. If you're currently using ROAS as a metric, just simply look and attribute your contribution margin to it. So again, if you have for whatever product or products that you sell, right? If you're making $100 in gross and it costs you $100 for that customer, that is a gross 100% ROAS. All right. But when you layer in the contribution margin, again, if it's 50%, you'd be at a 50% ROAS. All right. So it's pretty simple to do. You just have to know what your contribution margin is. And if you don't know what yours is, I've done videos on that. So just look that up. And figure out what yours is. I also talk about this in the book. I show you exactly how to break it down, how to get it, right? So if you haven't checked out the Scalable Profit Model, which is my book, make sure you do that. All right. So next, and this is a really big one, all right? ACAC, Allowable Customer Acquisition Cost. A lot of people think they know what they can afford to spend per customer, and maybe their agency, their marketing agency, or their paid media agency told them what it is, or maybe they're looking just at break even, and they're saying that's my, we're using that number to determine how much we can afford to spend. Maybe they're guessing, right? There's a lot of different things that people do that I've looked at every time I look at someone's business. There's all sorts of ways that people justify what they spend on a customer, and in my opinion, it's almost always wrong, right? They're looking at some sort of incomplete metric, right? So I guess the question is, what is the correct way to calculate allowable customer acquisition cost? And that formula is actually really simple, all right? It's in a given time frame. So figure out how long you want to take even. Figure out how long you want to break even on your customer acquisition. All right. And then it's just simply, there's a couple things you have to know for this. Number one is your time frame. Number two would be your contribution margin, like how much do you generate per customer, right? And number three would be your overhead per customer. All right. So if you're doing, if you have $1,000 in overhead and you're making $10,000 in revenue, that would be like $10 overhead per customer. All right. So I think I did that math right, but you're just looking at your overhead per customer. It's pretty simple to calculate. So once you know those numbers, it's just simply in a given time frame, it's your contribution margin per customer minus your overhead per customer. So what I mean by that is, let's just say that in the first, you want to break even in the first 90 days. Okay. So in 90 days, let's just say that their contribution margin is $200 per customer. All right. So that means that you generate in the first 90 days, you generate $200 in contribution margin per customer. All right. So now we have that number. And then you just simply subtract your overhead per customer. So if your overhead per customer is $100, right, then it would just simply be, and I think I did the math wrong before, by the way. I think it was $10 overhead per customer. Or maybe I said that, I forget now. Anyway, so $200 in contribution margin in the first 90 days that you generate. So if you don't know those numbers, make sure you have a data dashboard, make sure you're tracking these things. And then you subtract overhead per customer. So if that's $100 per customer, that means your ACAC, or what you're allowed to spend per customer, is $100, right? Now, Let's say that you've hit a plateau and you want to spend more, right? You want to scale where you are. So what options do you have, right? Well, the first one is more volume, because if you get more volume at the same ad spend, that's going to lower your overhead per customer. So that's one way to be able to spend more, is by lowering your overhead per customer. All right. The second way, of course, would be to trim your overhead. All right. So if your overhead per customer is X and then you lower your overhead cost, well, that's going to decrease your overhead per customer. All right. So if you decrease it from $100 to $50, that gives you that extra $50 that you just generated. You can now add that to your ACAC. So instead of it now being 100, now that ACAC can be 150, and that's how you scale volume without losing margin. All right. You have to, if you're going to scale this way, you also have to increase these, which brings me actually to the third one, is improve your economics, right? So if you want to spend another $50 per customer, well, you have to make that up somewhere, right? So either on the average order value, or in that first, again, we're still on that 90-day time frame. If you want to add $50 to your ACAC and be able to spend more so you can scale more, again, without losing margin, again, you have to make sure that what you're spending comes from somewhere else. All right. So if you somehow, in whatever way, get an extra $50 per customer, so let's just say from 200 to 250, well, now, and we keep that same $100 in overhead per customer, well, now it's 250 in contribution margin in the first 30 days minus the 100 in overhead. Now it's 150. If you did both, right? Let's just say you increased your economics, so it was now 250 in the first 90 days, and you lowered your overhead per customer to 50. Well, now that gets you an extra $100 in ACAC, so you could spend 200 instead of 100 at the same margin. But now you have, I mean, going from doubling, you could probably get, and it depends on so many factors, right? But you could probably get somewhere from double to 5 times the amount of customers at the same margin, which over lifetime, once you after those 90 days, you're still collecting contribution margin for each customer, which now you have more customers, so your overall profit is going to increase. The one thing I caution people on that is you have to know when that's going to happen. All right. So one of the mistakes a lot of people do is they'll change these numbers, and we're doing it on a 90-day time frame, and then they increase day one, and that you have to understand that we're doing it on a 90-day time frame, so the results don't start happening until 91 days, right? Because all of this is basically the same. Your like in terms of profit, right? So you're going to get more customers in those 90 days, but your profit won't start going up until after day 90 in this example. All right. So it's really, really, really important to understand that. And then the fourth way that you can increase this lever to be able to spend more is just simply by extending your your time frame, right? So and this is what I call the profit inflection point, but that's a different video. Um, so again, we've been talking about 90 days, but let's say you're stuck at 5 million and you want to hit 10 million, right? One of the levers that you have is just simply to say, okay, well, we'll go back to the $200 for our original example. Uh, so we go back to, okay, we know that we're generating $200 in contribution margin in the first 90 days. Well, what if we bump that up to 6 months? What if we get what if we get a bridge loan or something, and or some sort of line of credit or whatever it is, right? That gives us extra cash to float so that we can extend our timeline on when we break even. Well, let's just say that you add $100 between months 3 and 6 in contribution margin. Well, now you can generate $300 in contribution margin, but it takes you 6 months. Okay. And then you start profiting after that. Okay. So now, if we look at this and we go, and remember that the original ACAC was $100. And let's just say that we get an extra $50 in the first 30 days. Now we're at 250 in CM in contribution margin. We lower our overhead $50 per customer. All right. So now our overhead per customer is 50 instead of 100. Right. So now we're up to 200 in ACAC. So we've already doubled. And then we extend from 3 to 6 months on our time frame, and that adds another $100. Now, instead of being able to afford $100 per customer. Now we can afford 300 and we're going to be at the same profit level, okay? But it's going to take longer to complete that cycle. All right. So at this point, you're probably, I mean, if you three times your allowable customer acquisition cost, you're probably going to see like, I mean, up to 10 times the amount of customers. Again, it really depends on a lot of different factors, and I won't get into that in this video. But if you're doing 10 times the customers, but it takes you it's an extra 3 months to break even. I mean, yeah, you have to float an extra couple months, but also you have 10 times the customers giving 10 times the lifetime value. So assuming that you have a really good lifetime value, like ascension process in place, which you should, and if you don't, make sure you reach out to work with me because it's literally what I do done for you and with no risk, by the way. If that's the case, then long term, you're going to see a massive increase in your profit. And I can't do all that math in my head in terms of lifetime value and everything, but I could model this out. Like if you're a client of mine, we would model this out and be like, okay, if this happened, this happens. If this happens, this happens. If this happens, this happens, right? And you can know exactly what's going to happen before you actually do it. And you can actually predict your profit if you scale higher, right? And a lot of people don't know how to do that, right? And that's what I do with my clients. All right. So when you do this, all right, this symptom or this symptom, this system is so powerful, but you have to know your numbers, all right? Everything comes back to being data driven. And if you're not data driven right now, I want you to think back about what we talked about. I want you to think back in terms of that leverage we just created. I literally just showed you off the top of my head how to triple the amount of money that you're spending per customer and absolutely destroy your competition without losing any margin. And if you're one of those people that has scaled but lost margin, this is why it happened, okay? Because as you scale, your acquisition costs are going to go up. So this is going up over here, which is going to make your profit go down over here. And you have to know, if you want to counterbalance that so you can scale, keep the same profit margin, you have to pull other levers. And I just showed you 4 of them that you can pull, okay? So when you have all this in place, right? Your acquisition decisions are going to come from actual math. So you're going to know the results before it happens. Now, of course, you don't know exactly what's going to happen if you double your ACAC from $100 to $200, right? You don't know. You would have to ask your media buyer what they do. You'd have to probably do some small scale tests to see what happens, right? You have to test some variables here, but the math still stays the same in terms of what I just walked you through, all right? You also know which SKUs can be scaled profitably, because if you have a contribution margin of 25 or 30%, it's going to be harder to scale. It's going to change your math quite a bit versus like the 50% that I gave. And so it really just depends, okay, on a lot of factors. You're also going to know which channels are profitable and when. Okay, so you're going to be able to look and say, okay, let's say you're doing Facebook and Google and YouTube, okay, and you have different campaigns in each of them. And if you're not using data, you don't actually know when you're profitable per channel. Okay, so you may be profitable in 30 days on Facebook, but it takes you 90 days on YouTube. And then that way you know, okay, well, I can afford doing the 30 days, I can't afford doing the 90 days. So let's cut that for now. Let's optimize Facebook, or spend some time optimizing the one that's in 90 days. Or again, go out and get a line of capital. And if you have these numbers in place and you go to a capital provider and you say, look, I'm tracking and I know that every time I get a customer, they're worth X dollars by day 1, they're worth X dollars by day 30 and day 60 and day 90, right? Don't you think they're going to be just a little bit more conservative with what they give you, right? They're going to give you the loan, whereas someone, if you can't show that, they're not going to do that. A lot of banks don't understand this industry. They don't understand D2C. They don't understand that having a 3-month or 6-month or sometimes even 12-month, payback period in terms of your overall capital velocity is actually fairly common. Okay, because of low contribution margins and high acquisition costs and all the things. And inventory, it takes people in D2C a longer time to break even. Most people, if you account for inventory and overhead and acquisition, which most people don't, but if you do that, a lot of times, like you might think you break even in 30 days because you're only looking at your payback period from acquisition. But if you actually included your inventory and your overhead costs, that 30 days might be 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, right? It all depends. You also, if you go and use these data and become a financially data-driven company, you can also give this then to your media agency so that they're actually, most media agencies are getting paid based on you spending, but there's no accountability for them for you to actually be profitable. So if they scale your spend, everyone goes, yay, and they get more money because you're giving them based on percent of ad spend, right? But in most cases, when you increase your ad spend, your profit goes down, so they make more money and you make less money, right? It's this weird thing. So if you understand all this, this is going to get you dialed in better than just guessing, okay? Because you know, based on everything I just talked about, you know exactly how much you can spend and exactly how long it takes for you to make that money back. Don't you think that you're going to be able to make better decisions? And then you're going to look at whatever you're currently spending on customers, and you're going to know immediately if that's too much, if it's too little, whatever it is. Okay. So it's really, really, really important. All right. So I hope this makes sense. And if it did make sense, if you want help with all this, just reach out, leave a comment, or go to scaleadvisors.com. Let me know you want to work together. Or if you're not ready for that, check out the book. You can get it at scaleadvisors.com/book. Whatever it is, I hope it helped you. If you want to do neither of those things, I'd really appreciate a share, like, comment, subscribe, whatever channel you're on, do the right thing. Otherwise, I hope this helps you, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.